I am here with Raj Verma, CEO of SingleStore. How are you doing today?
Very well, thank you, Eric. Thanks for having me on the show. Look forward to our conversation.
Likewise, very happy to have you here. Why don't you take a moment and tell me about SingleStore?
Yeah, SingleStore is a database company based out of the Valley in California. It's a
The
value
Valley.
The Valley, that's right. The
Yeah.
Valley. And the value proposition is actually, I would say, unique to the extent that we've been pushing the boundaries of what is possible. We think impossible is an opinion, and the value proposition is, sort of amplifies that emotion or mission. And SingleStore is really a platform where you can transact with high fidelity, which means there's an indelible signature of every which transaction that happens. So you can do that and reason with data without moving data on the same platform in a hybrid multi-cloud environment with single-digit millisecond response times. Now that allows you to have unprecedented speed. As I said, the query speeds are single-digit milliseconds. And your ability to have real-time, and by real-time I mean millisecond actionable insights is possible using our platform.
Wow.
And that we believe is the stepping stone to generative AI. And that's the reason for our optimism. And that's the reason for the spring in our step these days.
Amazing. I'm going to try not to geek out too much because I actually spent 10 years of my career as a data scientist and data engineer. So we could really get down in the weeds, but I'm going to try my best not to do that. Although it is exciting to me. But what was the problem that you saw in the market, or the problem with existing data storage technologies that showed you this opportunity?
Yeah, I'm a computer science engineer by training, and the world that ultimately, as you know, Eric, it's always good to speak to a practitioner of data and databases because the conversation flows a lot better.
Yeah.
Ultimately, databases is nothing but storage and compute. I mean, you had databases 30 years ago as I was coming out of college in India. And the database world was really, sort of fragmented into the transactional side, where you had the DB2s and the Oracles of the world, and then the analytical side, which was the, Teradata or Netezza or what have you. Right? So you would transact on one database and throw it over the metaphorical wall to an analytical system, which will then glean insights into that transactional data, and then you would act on those insights in due course of time. Right? Now that was essentially the way the world has operated, and for the most part, 95% of the world still operates that way. Right, and that's really the opportunity, and sometimes the frustration if you're the consumer, and I'll give you examples of that as well. And then parlay that with the fact that in 2007, 2008, this happened, the mobile phone, right? So the volume, variety, and velocity of data just exploded. So now you started to have different swim lane databases for different data types. IoT and JSON and documents and this, that, and the other. So really what's happened in most data estates in a organization, they're not only fragmented in OLTP or transactional and analytical, but within each of those, there are swim lane databases, which has then resulted in hundreds of databases being used in a enterprise. And if you're building a application using 20 different databases, Eric, then by design, you have n squared minus 1 points of failure. That essentially means by design, you have an application with 399 points of failure, which in today's world or any world is just not acceptable, and definitely not in today's always on world. And that is really the problem that we solve by bringing transactions and analytics close to one another, and not only close, but seamlessly, onto one platform. And what we've then done, and we released that product last week, not only can you transact and analyze data, but you can also contextualize data on the same platform without moving data. And the contextualization is essentially the vector aspect. and the search that is a necessary step for building generative AI applications.
Yeah.
So we feel that we are a consolidated platform at scale and speed and simplicity, which is what would be required for generative AI applications going forward. And as I continue to say, that's what the excitement around SingleStore is.
So I don't even need to ask because I have felt this pain. So this was in 2007. I started working at Qualcomm, so big tech, big enterprise, as a software engineer. But essentially, my task or charter was to integrate and essentially create data as a service. So that wasn't a term back then. In fact, I don't even think SaaS was a term back then. It was still sort of
No, it
client
wasn't.
server based, right?
Yeah.
So data as a service was my charter back then, and I walked into this world where we had Oracle databases and various kinds of ERP systems and you name it, right? And then we had these data warehouse teams that built these very complex ETLs or sort of transformation layers, and they would build these reports. It would take 6 months to generate, some kind of intelligence, and by that point, the point was basically moot, right? They were these incredibly expensive projects. They took forever. They took an enormous amount of specification requirements and so on. And I'm an agile evangelist. I've been an agile developer my whole career. And so my charter was try to find a way to create an agile business intelligence function in the business. And they basically said, they sort of made a bet that you can't do it. And if you can't figure out how to make business intelligence agile, we are going to shut it down across the entire enterprise. We're just going to stop doing it because it was so expensive and so slow. And so you mentioned Netezza. So Netezza was one of the solutions that we landed on to basically speed up the development of the analytics side of things, right? So we invested a whole bunch, and I built a team, and we built all these integrations and whatnot, really cool stuff, pulling in data from all over. And I was able to actually I sat with the CEO, Paul Jacobs, and he could basically ask any question around the whole company, right? That's like, how much did we, this thing that happened in Taiwan, there was some impact to our manufacturing. How much did that impact our sales in Korea last year? And so all these different, financial systems and manufacturing systems and so on, boom, at the drop of a hat was ready for them. That was awesome. But my pain and the nut that I was never able to track or crack for almost 10 years was I was dependent on those transactional systems and those slow, clunky teams that had to maintain them in order to get my data. So when something broke on their end or in their world, most of my agile cycles were spent firefighting and keeping up with managing all of these upstream systems as opposed to innovating and actually even exploring the data. So this problem that you're talking about is sort of marrying those two together is something where if I had that, I was there for a long time. So this was probably 7-8 years ago, would have been a game changer, and we would have been able to get a lot more done. And for better or worse, we could have probably done away with a lot of those database administrators that had to keep those really clunky machines turning.
Yeah, no,
so I get it.
You make a very good point. A couple of really good points. One is what keeps incumbency in place. It's a very important point. I do think that what keeps incumbency in place is the fact that databases, if you come to think of it, Eric, is the only software industry where our clients or our users identify their job titles with a vendor. I'm a Oracle DBA, I'm a SingleStore DBA, I'm a XYZ DBA. Their entire, on their business card or LinkedIn profile, they have a vendor's name. So if you have 30 databases in an organization, you have 30 different teams, all
Yeah.
right? Because there is a complete retraining to be on a database,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
And by the way, a lot of the companies or organizations are held hostage by these teams, which
Mm-hmm.
are Oracle DBAs from 40 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
who essentially, tell you how difficult it's going to be to move, which, by the way, it will be difficult. However, it's
Yeah.
required. And by the way,
Yep.
I just use Oracle, again, a company I have high respect for. However, the fact is that you never really get um, advised without prejudice or bias,
Mm-hmm.
because there are hundreds of people on that team who would be out of a job if
Mm-hmm.
you modernize a certain database, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And the fragmented databases, by the way, I understand when you have a hammer, the world looks like a nail. And, I'm a CEO, I have to wear rose colored glasses, and I do. However, I have never been more convicted in my life, and I am a very, man with very strong convictions. I believe whether it's us or someone else who does this, the future of databases will be
Mm-hmm.
converged in terms of a platform where you can transact, analyze, and contextualize data without moving data.
Yeah.
Because if you go to any informed data practitioner around the
Mm-hmm.
world, and
Mm-hmm.
I spend a lot of time with them only almost on a daily, if not daily, weekly basis. Their number one issue: bad things happen when data moves, Raj. We don't
Yeah.
want data to move, right? And if you have 7, 8, 10 databases which are being used to build an application, there's a lot of data that is moving. Not only
Mm-hmm.
does bad things happen in the cloud world or today, Eric, it's also expensive.
Exactly. Yep.
Right. So, as I said, and I continue to say, I hope it's us who brings about that change. But even if it's not us, there will be the future when you and I are hopefully talking in the next 5, 7 years.
Yeah.
You are going to play a snippet of this podcast and say you made this prediction, and guess what? Now this seems like such an obvious prediction to
Like, of
make,
course.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
everyone's following it. So it's one
Yeah.
of those things.
Yeah.
Now
Well,
I hope it happens sooner, but I do think it's inevitable.
and so another challenge, we're talking about, big tech, but I've spent 20 years coaching and consulting early stage startups as well. And invariably, they always ask me, how can I leverage my data for, strategic decision making, right? I mean, knowledge is power, and they know that there's so much power stored in their databases. And my answer to them is always, you can't afford it. It's so expensive, not only in terms of money, but also in terms of time, of effort. And when you're a small team, you're very, very limited to how many resources you can spend trying to deal with all of this stuff. And there has yet to be a solution, I think, that makes it easy enough and de-risks it enough for a startup to really invest in business intelligence. And it's a shame, and so I've gone in and hacked together quick, SQL dashboards and things like that for them, thrown Tableau on top of, some reporting database or something like that. But it's not scalable. It's not sustainable. It's very, surface level, right? But the true sort of data exploration and analytics that I was able to do at Qualcomm is really unattainable for them. So this is, and I love these kinds of technologies, right? It's another one of these democratization forces as well, which, yeah, no, I get it. This needs to happen, and I hope it's you.
Thank you. I hope so too. I was just going to say, you bring about a really important point. Of the revenue that we do, of the 400 odd customers that we have, the fastest growing segment of our customer base, Eric,
Mm.
is soft SaaS companies
Mhm.
between 10 and $300 million
Mhm.
who are modernizing themselves, and you put it well, and monetizing the data that they've collected over time.
Yep.
I don't have permission to use the names, so I wouldn't. But a bunch of companies that come to mind who are in the entire arena of go-to-market applications, which allow you to automate right from lead gen to account reviews and forecasts, etc., before it goes into the almighty Salesforce.com.
Oh God.
So that entire automation of what we in the industry call the sales machine requires real-time updates, requires real-time context, and these SaaS companies have typically used, as they start off, they start using open source, Postgres or MySQL or what have you. And that starts hitting the wall in terms of scale, in terms of simplicity, in terms of, speed of marrying transactions with analytics. And we are slowly but surely emerging as almost a de facto standard for SaaS companies who want to automate or monetize, as you say, their large plethora of data to either come up with a new product line or to help the customers gain more insights into how they are using their SaaS platforms. And that, I would say, is right now between 1/4 to 1/3 of our business, and definitely 1/3 of our new business coming in through the door is these SaaS platforms who want to be, again, using one of your terms, want to be more agile and have a more personalized experience on their platform for their consumers and customers. So spot on.
That's fantastic. So, you mentioned it a couple of times, and I know I wanted to get to it. Let's talk about AI. I wanted to kind of set the preamble or leading up to this point, the foundation of why I think this is so important or such an important problem. Now, what are the new opportunities or capabilities that you're seeing, well, just blow my mind with all the cool stuff you're going to do.
Yeah, I think, I just came back from Davos, and it was a very, very productive couple of days, couple to 3 days there. Met a lot of business leaders, and unlike most other Davoses that I've been, or World Economic Forum meetings that I've been, this was 90% about Gen AI, and I think the verdict there was it's Gen AI or die. And I think that's what the CEOs and the business leaders came away with. And so you are going to see, a huge, in my opinion at least, a huge spend on organizations gearing themselves, readying themselves for generative AI. Right? Now, the one thing about generative AI is every man and his dog uses generative AI at least a few times in a sentence or at least in a conversation. And you can't really celebrate something which you don't quite understand, right? Generative AI is not a technology that descended on us yesterday. It's been in the making for, some would argue, 70 years since the digital industry, which is what, hardware and software and internet and mobile put into one is. It's been in the making for, decades now.
Yeah.
And I do think that the best definition that I sort of heard, which encapsulates the challenges and the opportunity of generative AI, is really into three buckets. The first one being the easy will get automated, right? The hard will become easy, and the impossible will become possible. So if you think of generative AI in these three buckets, then yes, the easy becoming automated is going to result in job losses, etc. I do think that in some sort of arc of time, you are going to see 50% of the current software jobs being automated. There's no ifs and buts about it. A lot of the customer support jobs, a lot of customer agent jobs will get automated. All right. And that's where the entire job conversation comes into play, right? The hard becoming easy is going to then open up opportunities for people who haven't been able to enter a certain class of problem solving, right? Because of the entry barriers being that high, who will enter that and contribute in a very meaningful manner. The one that will, like you said, blow your mind is the fact of the impossible becoming possible. And I personally feel in the science will be the biggest beneficiary of artificial intelligence, all right? Where you can condense 250 years of chemistry into a matter of, days or weeks or months, it is unprecedented. We've never been able to do it. The humans have never been able to do it. So drug discovery, new drugs coming out, which then yields or, lends itself to higher longevity, better quality of life, etc., is amazing. I was, as I mentioned, I was at the World Economic Forum, and I had an opportunity to spend some time with the CEO of Medtronics, and I'm sure he wouldn't mind me using this example. And he fascinating gentleman, high enthusiasm, high energy, and he was talking about these medical devices that exist today. And he was semi-joking when he said that we've reached a stage right now where when a patient dies, we are called in to switch his heart off or her heart off, right? Because that's the kind of refinement of the body and the machine that is happening right now.
Yeah.
And my obvious question was, and by the way, the other stat was, and he says, colonoscopy, not the best topic to talk about, but the fact is, the one thing that you can do to de-risk your colonoscopy is, guess what?
I have no idea.
The timing of your appointment. Get it before 11 a.m. because if you get one at 4 p.m., the doctor is so tired. Naturally, he's human, that he's likely to miss some spots. So now with the generative AI-based probe, the probe actually tells the doctor if there is a pinkness or a redness or what have you. It shines a metaphorical light on it to get that person's attention. So naturally, the diagnoses are a lot better already using AI. But the thing that blew my mind was, I said, you know what? Physical is sort of, advancements have happened, and billions, if not trillions of dollars of research go into extending the human physical life. But, the neurological diseases of Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and all the rest of it, what's happening there and how AI could help. And this was something that blew my mind. It says they've been testing by putting probes into the brains of Parkinson's patient. Doesn't hurt, apparently. And they collect data and then put this into a box and do various analysis, etc. And they have done initial trials where a patient of Parkinson's, as you know, is very, sort of jittery and, can't control movements, etc. They come in all shaking, uncontrollably into a doctor's office, and the doctor takes that box and switches it on, and the patient goes calm. It's as if you just come out of a 3-day meditation camp. And that sort of, you're going to see more and more of that impossible becoming possible.
Yeah. Wow.
About, the next frontier that medicine needs to, I wouldn't say capture, but get a better understanding is of the human mind and the neurological issues and multiple cancer and, other viruses. And I think AI is going to be phenomenal there. I think space exploration, the new age travel, and commute. So those are areas which I think AI will blow your mind and mine, Eric, going forward.